Well, the mistake was we had a break, and you took me up on the offer to write questions, and we now have a lot of questions. We'll just go ahead and go through. If they come in and out, so be it. First question here: as the Army achieves regional alignment over the next several years, are the geographic combatant commands working towards greater synchronization between the TSOCs and ASCCs in order to affect efficiencies between SOF and conventional forces? And that's a great question. I think the answer to that, well, first of all, my experience as a TSOC commander will tell you that the answer to that is yes. The TSOCs and the ASCCs today are working as closely as they ever have in the past. I think, in fact, that relationship is probably going to be what generates the whole notion of operationalizing theater security cooperation plans. I mean, take it out of the realm of engagement for engagement's sake, and make sure that in fact you engage for purpose, and in some cases you engage for purpose for a persistent presence in order to be achieving an effect. And both the ASCCs and the TSOCs are the ones that will have to collaborate on those campaigns and get the GCC commander to then validate and approve them. Now, it's not perfect, and I think that I'm speaking from my experience in CENTCOM and knowing what General Brooks and General Tovo are doing today. Again, I think we're making good strides here. But that's in a theater that, the battlefield coming back is telling us what's right and what we need to be doing. Where the demands are less pressing for the ASCC and the TSOC to work together, and the forcing function of the battlefield is not there, we're just now starting to see some movement in that direction. And so I'm optimistic that we're going to learn from CENTCOM to some degree. PACOM, for instance, General Brosnick and SOCPAC and General Wazinski and General Fuller are all working together to look at how the 25th Infantry Division's assets might be able to help a SOF effort in, let's say, country X without getting into it. And again, so I'm positive about where the direction's going. A lot of that in PACOM's not a GCC-driven event, though, and that's probably the one deficiency, I think, is that in our joint doctrine, again, I think that we could do some work on this notion of campaigning left of the JTF threshold, campaigning to prevent, campaigning to. But nobody likes to campaign because that sounds too much like war making, and but anyway, that was a good question, and I guess the answer is I think we're making good strides. And
sir, just to jump on board that, I think there needs to be more vehicles or opportunities for that to take place within the GCCs. Currently, they don't exist, so you get one major JCS exercise or something else that outside of some specific campaign planning event. And so as the BCTs become regionally aligned, we're going to have to re-look into some of the, I think at the GCC level, engagement strategy, so there is more synergy of effort there. Because right now, in many cases, you could be two ships passing in the night going into the same countries based on exercise schedules.
And you're speaking as the former SOC Africa commander.
That's correct.
And that's what I'm saying. It's uneven, but honestly, I think this is an area where the Army can help lead. Sometimes you have to, educate the prince, right? I think Machiavelli said that. I don't know if that use that. Probably not the right term. But sometimes you do have to educate up, and in this case, again, I think it's bright young, majors and lieutenant colonels at the TSOCs and ASCCs who are, looking at common problems, who are going to, I think, help us overcome conceptual hurdles here and start looking at how do we actually do these plans. And again, I'm optimistic, but there are places that we're not there yet. So. Okay. Anybody else want to comment on that? All right. Let's see. This one's for the SFCG, SF Command CG. In a regionally aligned force environment, do you view SOF as the battle space owner? Quite the opposite in the current OEF context. And what, if any, additional training is required within SOF, given the depth and breadth of responsibility of a battle space owner?
Okay, was that for me?
That was for you. Yes.
Okay.
I'm interested to hear what you say to that too.
Exactly. At the risk of being fired, I was never one to advocate for the SOF to own battle space, because of all of the functions and activities and expertise that requires, and that we have always benefited from Army, theater logistics, that expertise that is resident within corps and divisions, the size of their staffs, etc. The list goes on and on, that would reinforce that decision for a SOF component command to be much more focused on lines of operations or activities vice geographical battle space. And since our activities transcend battle space all the time, it was also another reason to support not going down that road. It was an interesting discussion in Afghanistan when we were standing up the Sajota regarding SOF taking battle space in specific areas. So would it be something like permanent JSOTAs that were out there? And we went back and forth on that, and I think the jury is still out. So maybe in selected, discrete, focused areas, SOF could potentially have the capability to be the owner of that. But by and large, my opinion or my experience was no, and we don't want to go down that road.
Anybody else want to render an opinion?
All I wanted to put a footnote from the school's perspective and just say that I think these kinds of questions and these compelling questions, though, don't die here at the round table, that we're going to capture them and we're taking them. That's exactly what the experimentation is all about. That's what we expect to do with track white sands and Simon Quest and a couple other exercises and experiments that we plan to do in the future. So there's a lot of great questions, and this certainly is one of those that are right in the heart of the issue of SOF, conventional force integration, or independence.
So I was just going to say, I can think of very few times when SOF should be the battle space owner, but they would come nearest to it in shaping when the battle space owner is actually the host nation or the locals. And I've often thought, to be slightly controversial, that on the conventional side can occasionally be very grand, I own the battle space, but actual fact their understanding of what's going out there is not 100%. And it may be the job of the Special Forces to help them illuminate what is going on in their battle space by connecting them to the indigenous population that live there, who aren't aware that somebody is claiming that they're the battle space owner, and to try and produce a better, whatever colour code you want, green, red, white, blue picture. And I think Special Forces can often play a very important role, as I say, in illuminating what the battle space is to the poor individual who's been tasked with owning it, when in reality there's many unconnected players who are out with his or her command.
Well, thank you. That's, I think, a great point. This is for the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. How are you maintaining building staff competencies in your division staff relating to planning, targeting, and executing operations with Special Forces?
Well, first, let me just, in terms of where we are as a team, the command has just reformed after a period of reset, and we're oriented on opportunities to bring the staff together. And my intent, as stated to the team, is that we'll include, as we can, special operations as part of what we're due. We've got an opportunity to do it as we deploy our division tactical command post at the National Training Center during a brigade rotation this January. The division will have a warfighter exercise next year, where I anticipate, given the complexity that the Army intends to impose in our training events at division and corps level, that we will have an opportunity to bring special operations forces related efforts into our training exercises. And as I noted earlier, we already now have organized on the staff, albeit not special operators, but those functions, those activities that have been associated with special operations, that being civil affairs and military information support operations today, training as part of our effort. So again, there's an opportunity for us in the division to up our game, to increase our skills, and then to go into complex and hard, rigorous training events to be able to test those and work those as deployments occur.
Open this up to everybody on the panel here. Given the anticipated fiscal constraints which may impact future training and exercises, what can be done to ensure SOF trains with conventional forces on a routine basis, especially at locations where there are no SOF forces? And Chris, why don't you take first whack at it, and we'll open it up.
So I think we have to recalibrate our concept of routine. So one of the key components of the coalition or conventional force and SOF integration is the core capabilities and expertise that both these units bring together and eventually blend for some capability. So our first responsibility and requirement is to ensure that in this fiscally constrained environment that we're staying focused on our core capabilities and are enhancing as best we can their expertise that we're each going to bring to the table. And then for, I think that our Army is moving more and more to lining kind of an R4Gen process for the Special Forces groups and the divisions for their combat training center, so that we can maximize those opportunities for training, multi-echelon training. So I think that's where we'll have to seek out opportunities where we get our best bang for the buck, both with the CTCs and then, again, with some support and help from the GCCs, maybe some actual in-theater opportunities and exercises where we're working closely together to hone those interoperability skills. So, and that's specifically where SOF and conventional forces are residing on the same basis. Other than that, I know the division commanders, the corps commanders out there, all, where they have a special forces group, have an increasingly closer and closer knit relationship with their SF groups there, and they make it happen on pretty much a monthly or daily basis, those training opportunities.
Yeah, I would just add, if I could, and I think Chris made a good point about the combat training centers will provide an integrating point of integration for this type of training. And so while they're not co-located on a day-to-day basis at our installations, that training event is not just a 21-day rotation at the National Training Center. It's preceded by literally months of preparation and leader development before that occurs, where we have the opportunity and have at times been able to bring special operations into these training events. The brigade I referred to earlier that's deploying in Afghanistan did have the opportunity while at the JRTC to work with a unit that will be serving, a special operations unit that will be serving in Afghanistan during their deployment. So again, I think that's an important point. And at the division and corps level, the MCTP program will have opportunities for the training of division and corps commanders and staffs on special operations on a persistent basis as the units prepare to have those training events.
Could I just add a brief note? I think this has been mentioned in general terms, but it seems to me the importance of training together downrange implies a need to go to Congress and join the issue of the JSETs, either an expansion of the current authority or a JSET-like authority for the conventional force.
Just going back to the training, I'd just like to point out that the infrastructure has never been better for conventional forces and special operation forces to work together in battle command, mission command scenarios. So using the DREN and other infrastructure that does exist, it's never been easier to do. I mean, and right now in real time we're building, actually the Army's building a special ops mission command battle lab and training center for us at Fort Bragg, which will make that even easier to connect to any distant center, distant organization that wants to train with us.
Okay. I have to admit, I am trying to decipher a little bit of the handwriting here. So forgive me if I don't get to your question. I may not have been able to read it. So, unlike the Army, for years, U.S. Marine Corps leaders resisted creating a Special Forces unit in the Corps, except for World War II. We have a historian out here, Raider battalions and Vietnam-era recon. The reasoning was there was no need for an elite force within an elite force. Now the Marines have built a Special Forces unit, MARSOC. What do you think that says about future warfare and how it will be conducted by all services for the panel? You want to start on that? I can give it a swing.
Well, I could just be controversial about Marines, I suppose. In that there's a sort of overlap in that it's about how leads get on. In that the Royal Marines would take the view that there is a Special Forces element drawn out of the Marines, but it is for a particular role, if you see what I mean. It's optimised with its subwater, subsurface capability, obviously it's closer to your SEAL type capability, and that it has a very specific niche role. Having said that, I think there is, I talked earlier about the role that Special Forces have as a joint enabler, and there is, huge merits in having people within the Special Forces who started their lives across the different services. It helps the UK Special Forces to have people who started in the Royal Navy as a stoker or whatever. One of the strengths of Special Forces, I have always thought, is the breadth of experience that people serving in quite a small unit can bring to it. And so we have always wanted to keep Special Forces recruiting from as broad a background as possible, rather than finding we've just got a small bit of a regular force, which is the feeder school for Special Forces. So, from a UK perspective, we very much welcome all the armed forces joining in.
Chris, you want to talk about your Marine Corps brothers?
A welcome capability to the arena. So, invitation being maybe the highest form of value. seeing their development in their MSOC teams, and they bring a significantly robust capability in many other areas. Maybe it's recognition of the Marine Corps, the USOC, or some of the other formations they had weren't tailored or flexible enough to deal with the future environments that are out there. And the MSOCs that are out now are going through that maturity process of learning how to tailor and organize their force into the current environment as well as prepare for the future environment. And that's one thing about our brothers in the Marine Corps. It's esprit de corps ambition, and they stay focused on that, and so I'm sure they will come up with some very good solutions for within the SOF community good for us in the future.
Lyndon, you want to comment on Marines? No? Well, my own, anything?
Well, we do, when it comes to Marines, we do by-service work. I mean, the manuals we produce at the School for Civil Affairs, the by-service manual. A lot of NISO doctrine is also shared with the other services. So I would say when it comes to us actually collaborating, that already occurs. And they come to all our schools, and we share TTPs across a lot of skills that we do together, military free fall being one, and some of the other proficiencies that we have. I think we're very collaborative right now. Yes, sir.
My own, I think competition, and it's not really competition, but as much as first platoon will always compete with second platoon, third platoon. I mean, there's always amongst all these organizations going to be some competition. But in the realm of ideas and approaches, the MARSOC elements have been built and are doing, I think, a tremendous service for us, for SOCOM in particular, in the FID arena, the SFA arena, the small footprint coin arena. And I tell you, there's some very powerful things that they do as they build these organizations down. They're much more apt to put a human SIGINT capability down at the lower levels. And I think we on the Army side, who pride ourselves, again, we've built our unconventional warfare force for the purpose of doing unconventional warfare around the world, but we use it heavily in the COIN arena. And in the COIN mission set, we can learn from what I think the Marine Corps, of course, learning from us and looking at how we ad hoc our way through things. They, from inception, have built into their organization some capabilities, some enablers that frankly, we're just now fighting to get into our force in the Army. And so again, I think for the niche that they fill, they're not very big. They've provided a good service to us. And they do tie, as General Page said, they tie into the maritime service and into that whole the Marine Corps ethic. And as the slide shows up there, frankly, it's not just on the littorals fight. The Marines have some capabilities that are very useful, and the Marine Corps forces will be there. So it's useful having Marine Corps SOF in our formation as well. We've got one from, I think, an NCO here, Ferd. You can help with this. It says, can you please readdress at what level SOF conventional partnership will be trained? So, Captain's Career Course, Sergeant Major's Academy. How about the advanced NCO courses, platoon sergeant, and all that good stuff?
Yes, sir. Well, I would say just what you said, sir. So
all of that.
All of that.
Yeah.
But well, right now the main effort has been on the Captain's Career Course and CGSOC. That's been where the main effort's been. But actually, we are working with the Sergeant's Major Academy right now to make sure that core tasks that we consider special ops tasks get reflected in the core curriculum that would be captured by the Warrior Leader courses, the Advanced Leader course, and the Senior Leader courses. So I know that's going on right now in real time. But personally, I think for the NCO Corps, I think the biggest learning is going to come when we actually prove the fidelity of the exercises that occur at the training centers, because I think that's where the best learning goes on, when the guys actually have to go perform and work together. So I look forward really to seeing that mature, along with the professional military education programs that are already being developed.
Just on that, I mean, our commanders understand the intent that, you know, this is a shared battle space. So as you go out to the post camps and stations where there are SOF units, you are likely to see them. They're part of the, I mean, Bob Brown will tell you that at I-Corps, at JBLM, the 1st Special Forces Group, and the Ranger Battalion, and the 4th of the 160th, and even the small SWCDET that's out there, is a part of the Army's community out there. And there are training events that the group will run that they'll, you know, reach across, and organizations from across the post will help support. And likewise, there'll be training events, you know, it could be range events or whatever that the SF guys are running, and they'll, you know, they'll bring in units to work. And I think that's happening just because commanders understand what the intent is. Somebody asked me a question about what do you do in places where, you know, you're not assigned co-located. And this is where really the PME and getting into the doctrine is important. And again, we're not going to see return on investment until you know, long after I've, you know, left uniform service. That's why it was so important for us to actually have the break and see the Army allow us to, again, move beyond just having FMs that tell us how we do our business, and instead embedding what we do into a doctrinal publication which tells everybody in the Army and external what we do. You know, again, it's broad, unclassified terms, broad strokes, but I think those are all important initiatives whose return on investment, you know, we're going to see just continue to increase and magnify. So. This is from a Brit officer. There's probably only one or two in the audience. You can probably pick them out if you. What do you think of the political acceptance to utilize SOF over conventional force due to general perception of the public and media within the U.S.? I guess it probably wouldn't be a good. We'll let a U.S. officer answer that. I guess that's it. You know, I'm not sure. I think the political leadership of the country have become very accustomed to certainly certain aspects of our special operations capability. I mean, again, you think about the Osama bin Laden raid, right? I mean, who was sitting in the, you know, with the president there? You know, you had an Air Force officer who was from a, you know. Anyway, that. So I think they understand, but I think there's a growing understanding that, you know, there are limits to what in fact that tool can do. And I think that you know, as the understanding improves of how the Army can, you know, every day the Army's got 30,000 soldiers around the world from, you know, not only our corps and ASCCs, but from NETCOM and MEDCOM and a bunch of foundational activities that the Army provides. 30,000 soldiers every day. They're in the GCCs doing the country's good work. Now, we don't get a lot of credit for that, but that's our Army non-SOF out there doing the nation's work to help secure the country. I think we're going to try to up the understanding of what just that means, and I think as you look at the regionally aligned force concept, and as it partners successfully with us in the SOF community who are out there engaging, I'm hoping that at some point the distinction between, you know, hard distinction between SOF and conventional force begins to soften. because really it takes everybody to do this stuff. Again, so in fact, I think that in 4 or 5 years, my hope would be that this is no longer really a relevant topic for even AUSA. That in fact, just like jointness, at some point, remember when we were talking about how joint was so important, and now it's an accepted part of our, assignment process. It's an accepted professional development requirement, and we fight joint. We don't fight as Army formations purely. We fight for joint SOF or joint headquarters. So my thought is that if we do this right, we get the doctrine right, and the education right, and we continue with things like JRTC 1301, where the 2nd of the 82nd worked with a 3rd Battalion of the 7th Special Forces Group, a huge military information special support command element that was working there, a CA element that was working there, that this will become the accepted norm. And with that, I think will come a better understanding politically as to the utilization of the Army. That's not the right question. The right question is, can we retool ourselves appropriately for this problem? Not having to ask, is it a special ops problem or is it a conventional problem? So, if that makes any sense. Anybody else want to take a crack at the political acceptance piece?
Everything.
Yeah. And the answer is everything. What can engineers do for SOF? I'm not sure who. Chris, you want to talk about everything from CVs to Red Horse to...
Counter IED to...
That's exactly right.
Space defense. So I think the most coveted unit there, and certainly now in Afghanistan, is the engineer access just for base closure. Shut down bases and rotate them out. Everyone needed engineers. Great deal of respect between the teams and the sappers out there. So I could go on and on and on about our efforts to try to have engineers more closely aligned, tasks organized into our chief of staffs because of the incredible capabilities, the rapid capabilities they bring. So, what you posed out there.
No, I would, and we also have to remember that these are limited resources, especially when deployed, and so route clearance in particular, which I know is a high demand, low density capability, will be one of these that provides real life-saving and operational benefit, but has to be managed very carefully. And so providing it to one force on the battlefield robs it from another. And that's I think, one way to just add on top of what you said, Chris.
Not enough.
That's right.
In fact, somebody mentioned they were from the 8th group. Sir, would you say you're 8th group? In the, before we threw out the baby maybe with the bathwater after Vietnam, and the reaction to the coin problem set that left certainly a bad taste in everybody's mouth after Vietnam concluded the way it did. We had an experiment where you had MPs, engineers, medical elements that were embedded as an organic part of the 8th Special Forces Group, and it was the SAF. It was a Security Assistance Force. And I think one of the things that we're going to experiment on is maybe a different formulation of the same sort of idea, because we do have a lot of these campaigns that are ongoing, and as Tony said, you know, we have the software gen process, which we're optimistic that will generate the requirements that will match up with the soft forces as we forecast to the Army what our needs are out of the TSOC campaign plans. We have the onset, the renewal of the Global Synchronization Conference that SOCOM will hold, where we will bring the GCCs and the TSOCs together with the providers to include, you know, not only AUSA and the components at SOCOM, but I think also we'll get the Army involved in that. So I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to be able to have systems that will bring us together appropriately. But I do think that there's merit in maybe taking a relook at that concept. And so again, from just an experimental standpoint, to see if we can make a case for it to be seriously considered in some future POM, we're gonna take a look at it.
I'll just say, sorry, two brief things back. I mean, firstly, we actually recruit quite a lot of engineers in special forces on the basis that they, how can I put this nicely? In terms of our recruiting, the engineers, our brighter people are put into the engineers because they're triple trained from the outset as combat infantrymen. They're given an engineer trade set, electrician or plant operator, and also have a combat engineer. So they're multi-skilled from the outset. So the raw material is good material for special forces to pick on. But I suppose more fundamentally, it's the question about the degree to which in wide area security or COIN operations, what can the military practically bring of benefit in order for consent-winning activity? And it's often stuff that the engineers have in the skill set. But it's in very difficult terrain, and it's in where the risk to them is quite high. So I have seen in Afghanistan, I certainly saw up at Uruzgan, quite novel combinations between, the Australians did, essentially an engineering unit selected for its engineering expertise, and then given a special forces element to help it work out the degree of threat and the degree of risk involved in operating. And the special forces doing some consent-winning activity to get them into the area, and then the engineers coming out and doing the task, having worked out the minimum period of time in which to get that task completed. You've done the maths. So instead of spending weeks fitting about building wells, you could get the thing in rapidly. And somewhere in there is a model, if you believe that that sort of activity does help buying the time and winning consent. So the view that engineers and soft, I think there is somewhere in there utility.
Yeah, I got very attentive a few minutes ago when General Cleveland looked down to where I was sitting a few minutes ago and started talking about the old timers, because I was concerned about what some of the sidebar conversation was going on between he and General Page, because in addition to the professional development opportunities you have here, it's also an opportunity to see old friends. Of course, General Page was a very, very young officer when I served with the British Parachute Regiment, and here he is Lieutenant General, so it sort of starts to make you feel like a dinosaur now. But Linda, we're very pleased to have you here also. I had the opportunity to go several times to Afghanistan and bring Richard Haas in. It's better to hear your comments than to argue with him over diplomacy versus the bayonet in Afghanistan. But my time in with the Special Operations Forces has seen a lot of evolution, and it's a credit to the leadership of these gentlemen here that we enjoy the tremendous capability we have today. The challenge in the future is going to be what they addressed, and that is, how do we maintain the integration, the training, the readiness in the future? How do we migrate the tactics, techniques, and procedures that SOFT continues to develop and move that into the conventional and general purpose forces? And how do we stay integrated completely with the interagency arena and our coalition partners? And we're blessed to have Jacko here, who is our closest partner in the special operations arena, and one that basically we learned an awful lot from in the early days and continue to share our TTPs with. On behalf of General Sullivan, AUSA, and the Institute of Land Warfare, General Cleveland, I want to thank you and your panel and for your hard work and efforts today. He invites you to free drinks this evening at the reception. Let's give him a round of applause. Thanks very much. And I know I failed to mention this earlier. The panel has agreed for a very brief period of time to meet at room 205 with the media who desire to meet with them privately.